why is basic science important? That's like asking why breathing is important. Basic scientific research looks at fundamental principles and phenomena without having immediate practical applications in mind. For every scientific puzzle, even for problems which are pressing problems in medicine for that matter, there is possibly an organism in the tree of life that is holding an answer. So you have to rumble in mud and turn some rocks and have intuition. Can I find in a natural world a system in which I can study this process to its extreme? Yet, as we dramatically change this planet, we're possibly losing these ecosystems and the beautiful worlds within them faster than we can discover them.
There's so much that we don't know, and some organisms can have a very large impact on our planet. And so if we don't spend time to stop and understand how they function and the basic mechanisms that underlie their behaviors, then we don't really have a good understanding of the planet that we live on.
There's a ton of problems in this world that we all want to solve. It often feels like we have to solve these problems yesterday. But on the other hand, I think the starting point has to be fundamental basic science. It's at the root of all of our understanding. Without that root, it's almost we're often flying blind. I don't want to fly blind. No question in cell biology, or biology for that matter, makes any sense to me without the context of an ecological framework of what do these organisms actually do, what is their daily life. And deeper explanations for these observations has really led us to new areas, completely new spaces. For example, a very simple idea, where does cellular behavior come from? So we started thinking about this, and the one thing that we realized is that we should just make a behavioral map of the tree of life, where we go out there, we look at single cells, we observe them in their native habitat, and rather than just taking a DNA sequence or just taking photographs, we actually observe their behavior and their interactions in a native environment. One of those characters is Lacrimaria oler. The cell is only 40 microns in size, but it has the capacity to extend its neck almost a millimeter. So 50 or 60 times the size of an organism itself.
When I first joined the lab, I had been working primarily in, I would say, more conventional biology, and then I saw this organism when I met with Manu, and I was just really excited. I was like, it's really fun to watch, it's really beautiful, and it can do so many things. Normally when we find them in environments like this, like marshy environments, you can see that the cells like to hide in debris and their body stays in the debris, and then they send the neck out to search for food. And then at the very tip of the neck is their mouth, and they can then open that and capture something and reel it back towards their body.
And so I think we started thinking about it, and we recently discovered a really, I would say, beautiful origami. And what's really remarkable about this cell is it's using a geometrical construct to control this origami, to actually enable a robust folding, unfolding behavior. So in some sense, we have named this the geometry of behavior, that often enough the state, the memory, behavior might actually not just be encoded in just the electrical pulses, but purely in a geometrical context or even in a mechanical context. A completely new paradigm that I would not have thought about before studying many of these sets of systems. And again, at a cellular scale, it's just unfathomable that all of this is happening at 40 microns, 50 micron length scales. Is it just evolution gone amok, that just for no purpose would it just make incredibly remarkable structures? We work on these cells called acantharians. We were in Bermuda. We cast a net, and out comes this soup of cells, and every possible one of them is a glittering star. We are literally seeing under a starry night stars under our microscope.
They have these star-like skeleton structures that are really beautiful, but what's interesting about them is the skeleton are actually heavier than the shells that you might think of in other cells like diatoms. And so you'd imagine that they would sink very quickly towards the bottom of the ocean considering how heavy they are, but they're actually found in surface waters. And so we've been trying to understand how they're actually found in the surface despite the fact that they should sink, and whether or not that comes from active processes that the cells might be doing or passive from their geometry. That's something we're exploring right now.
We have some hints now to be able to understand that the structures that they make possibly help them remain buoyant or control their density. Darwin described it as just the most beautiful example of evolution playing out at cellular form. But we still only are at a level of description for this remarkable cell. All we have are names and shapes. There's another really beautiful structure that we found in the little stones that sea cucumbers make in their body. These are literally single crystalline stones, forms and shapes that are just unfathomable. And we actually don't know its function. We actually don't know what ossicles do. For me, it's beauty run unchecked. The cellular forms that they make are just so remarkable. And, to a certain extent that it takes your breath away, and you look at it and you ask yourself a question, why would that be? And of course, as scientists, we're trying to rationally explain some of this. But I just enjoy it even when I can't explain it, which I think I had to learn a little bit. Why work on something? Why pick a problem? Why think about it? And I think this is true for me. I think it's true more generally, is because it's beautiful. The world that we live in, the tapestry is so complex. Science and many of these tiny little breadcrumbs lead you to vistas and ideas that just are nowhere in the back of my head when I'm thinking about the problem alone. I think deep within every single scientist is really an artist. And if we're honest to this creative process, let the data or the living object that you're so curious about lead the way, and it'll actually take you to a new place. And then you just have to be comfortable that this is not where I want it to be, but look how beautiful it is.